When he was first diagnosed, he was having, I guess, up to 100 small seizures a day.
Right now he's having seizures. That's what that is. Those are what it looks like. The ones he has. You alright? Breathe. Breathe. You bitch him out? You gonna be okay?
We didn't even think about cannabis. You know, it was never a consideration for any aspect of our lives. If someone would have told us like 5, 10 years ago that this was gonna be our life, I would have been like, you're out of your mind. We started noticing that he would just completely just collapse. One day he'll fall forward, another day he would just fall backwards, another day both knees would buckle under him, he'll just collapse. And he started hitting his head, so we started patting the floor. We weren't sure what was gonna happen, so we put a bike helmet because that's the only thing we had at the time. Prior to even getting the helmet, he had bruises in his forehead and swelling in the back of his head from the falls.
It took a toll on his development. He wasn't progressing, particularly in his speech. And at one point we noticed that he was getting weaker. His gross motor skills, fine motor skills, speech development. AIDEN came home from a hospitalization and he was on his second medicine. And of course, after every medication, they'll say, oh, he'll be fine. He's gonna, no seizures, everything's gonna be okay. That day, he had a bad day. After he came home from the hospital, 100 small seizures the whole day. I went to my husband, I said, we gotta try the CBD. We cannot do this anymore.
CBD oil is the part of the cannabis plant that doesn't have the euphoric, the psychoactive effects, which is why it's given for children oftentimes, because it's an anti-inflammatory, anti-convulsant, anti-muscle spasm, and it's also a anti-anxiety. For children that are experiencing chronic pain states, that are cancer patients, that are epilepsy patients, the cannabis plant can really improve quality of life.
Dr. ORRIN DEVINSKY has been conducting clinical trials using cannabidiol on patients with epilepsy since 2014.
Tip of this finger, look at me and touch your nose. You know the scheme. And the other one? Left hand? Perfect. Can you open and close your hands fast? And show me how big you can smile?
His latest study shows that the use of cannabidiol significantly reduces seizures in patients with Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet syndrome, two severe forms of epilepsy.
With the advent of states like California and Colorado legalizing medical marijuana, families began to use it in their children with epilepsy. Parents were coming to physicians like me saying, can we get this? And my first thought was, well, let's study it in the proper way scientifically with good trials.
It was really hard to make plans because we never knew when Sylvie was going to have a seizure. Our lives pretty much revolved around that, wouldn't you say, Sylvie?
Yes.
Yeah. Since Sylvie's been part of the study, taking the CBD oil.
Less seizures.
Quite a lot. Quite a dramatic change.
Less.
I don't think you've had any seizures in the last year.
He had been having seizures since age 3 months old, and severe seizures that were lasting over 30 minutes, necessitated 911 calls and ambulance rides to the hospital. Before we started the cannabis, he had pretty significant behavioral issues with maybe half an hour of violent meltdowns. We started CBD oil. We didn't see the seizure frequency necessarily decrease a huge amount, but we did see developmental milestones being met, and we saw his appetite increasing, and he grew 5 inches and gained 10 pounds. We've seen the seizure duration decrease. More often than not, they don't go past 3 minutes, so that was worth it. The main problem with cannabis is its Schedule I status federally, so that makes it federally illegal. Schedule I means that it has no medical benefit and a high potential for addiction. There is a disconnect there with the Schedule I status and the evidence that we have now of cannabis as medicine. He can't get his cannabis dose at school or on school grounds because there's actually no policy in place yet whether it can be administered. It can only be us. Since it's not an FDA-approved medication, the insurance companies are not going to cover the cost of it. It can be anywhere from $100 to $1,000 a month.
A lot of families can't afford that. We feel blessed that we were able to afford it. If we get a pharmacy drug, where my coverage is $5. Oh, but for the cannabis, it's not covered at all, and I just think that's not fair.
There is still a huge stigma regarding medical cannabis. Healthcare practitioners may have their own cultural biases, but healthcare practitioners have to realize the difference between their opinion versus scientific fact.
One number I like to keep in mind is that in America, every year, about 80,000 people die from alcohol-related problems. About 40,000 people die from opiate-related problems. And no one knows the number from cannabis-related problems, but it's probably under 10.
The FDA just approved the first cannabis-based medicine for treatment of Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet syndrome.
I think that can really begin to break the barriers for healthcare practitioners really discussing it and feeling like there is some data that they can go on.
So now we're seeing between 2 to 4 drop seizures a day. I hope that we can, get total seizure freedom, have a close to normal life, be able to, express himself, be able to read, just for him to be happy.